What if one day, America's closest friends simply stopped visiting and no one noticed until businesses began to die in less than a year? Over 5 million Canadians, formerly the most reliable tourists to the US, have quietly chosen not to return. According to data from the US National Travel and Tourism Office, Canadian visitation dropped by more than 40% between 2024 and 2025, with some states seeing over 50% declines in key regions. For towns where tourism makes up nearly half of local income, this is a breaking point. Cafes once packed with snowbirds now shutter by dusk. Border hotels report record low bookings. Seasonal workers have been laid off weeks earlier than expected, from rising political tension to unfavorable exchange rates. The reasons are piling up, but so are the consequences. This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. In this video, we uncover 10 US states will collapse without Canadian tourists. Some may surprise you. Let's begin. Number 1. Texas. What happens when even Texas, land of cattle, oil, and oversized optimism, starts to feel empty? In 2024 alone, over 1 million Canadians crossed the border into the Lone Star State, making it one of the most visited American destinations. They didn't just flock to Houston's medical centers or Austin's live music streets. They came for long-term RV stays in the Hill Country, fishing weekends along the Gulf Coast, and winter residencies in quiet towns like McAllen, Harlingen, and Kerrville. But by early 25, something broke. Parking lots that once teemed with Canadian-plated trucks were now barren. RV parks reported occupancy rates as low as 20%, while hotels along I-35 quietly slashed staff and canceled seasonal hiring plans. It wasn't just inflation that pushed them away. Behind the scenes, tensions between the US and Canada were building. In late 2024, Canada's federal government issued a subtle travel advisory, citing social climate divergence and increasing regional unpredictability in southern US states. An unusual move that drew little media attention but spoke volumes. On social media platforms like Reddit and TikTok, thousands of Canadians began sharing uncomfortable border experiences, aggressive questioning, and a rising discomfort with Texas's shifting political and social identity. I used to feel welcome. Now I feel watched. One Canadian posted under a thread titled "Why We're Skipping Texas This Year." For local Texans, especially in small towns, the absence has been brutal. A campground owner near Fredericksburg said, "My February used to be booked solid with Canadian regulars. This year, I barely filled a quarter of the spots." Her husband, who once ran a seasonal barbecue stand for tourists, now works nights cleaning gas stations. Families that once counted on winter tourism to pad their income have seen that revenue vanish in silence. Grocery stores report steeper unsold inventory, laundromats stand quiet, and freelance shuttle drivers, many retired veterans supplementing their pension, are left waiting at airports for rides that never come. Texas prided itself for decades on its big heart and warm welcome, but when the perception shifts, when long-trusted guests begin to feel unwelcome, and it doesn't take much for them to pack up and never look back. Some Texans now wonder, did we trade away more than we realized? Did we push too hard without listening close enough? And as May grows quieter, and Canadian voices disappear from local diners and roadside festivals, Texas isn't just losing tourists, it's losing the heartbeat of its economy, if that silence keeps spreading. No amount of billboard slogans will bring back the trust that's already driven across the border. Number 2, California. Everyone believes California is untouchable, a land of endless sunshine, global fame, and boundless opportunity. But in 2025, the Golden State faces a chilling truth: even paradise can feel abandoned. At its peak, California welcomed close to 1 million Canadian tourists each year, many returning to the same neighborhoods, same beaches, and same family-run shops. From the vineyards of Napa to the palm-lined boardwalks of Venice Beach, Canadians played a quiet but crucial role in California's tourism economy. But as of this year, something has cracked. Hotel occupancy rates in San Francisco and San Diego have dropped by up to 30% compared to early 2024. Popular Hollywood tour companies have scaled back their operations. Even souvenir stalls, once bursting with foot traffic, are shuttering earlier every day. And while headlines blame inflation or airfare hikes, the real cause is harder to swallow. It's trust. Over the past 18 months, Canadian social platforms have been filled with travel stories that sound more like warnings border delays. aggressive questioning by officials, subtle discomfort in tourist hubs. Add to that the growing unease over US-Canada trade tensions and cultural divergence, especially California's perceived contradictions between tolerance and high cost, and a shift becomes visible. A Canadian couple from Montreal wrote, "We used to dream of California. Now, it feels like we're not supposed to be here." There's also a financial sting. The weakened Canadian dollar now makes a basic California dinner 30 to 40% more expensive than the same meal in Spain or Mexico. And yet, in those countries, many Canadians say, the welcome feels warmer. A former seasonal resident who once spent every March in Santa Monica shared online, "Why would I keep coming back to a place where everything costs more and feels colder?" These aren't just opinions, but the warnings echoed in the quiet desperation of California's small business owners. A bakery owner near the Santa Monica Pier confessed, "Every March, I'd bake birthday cakes for the same Canadian family. They haven't come back this year, and now, most days, I barely cover rent." She's considering shutting down for good, joining the growing list of shops that depended on visitors who no longer show for working-class Californians. This shift is deeply personal. These tourists didn't just tip well, they stayed long, returned yearly, and filled the gap during slow seasons. Their absence is the difference between paying rent or not, between keeping the heater on or skipping groceries for a week. California still glows with beauty, but if that glow is no longer shared, if the state forgets to nurture the quiet relationships that kept its streets buzzing in winter, then what is left? Because a view means nothing if no one is standing there to admire it anymore. Number 3, New York. New York may be known for the glowing lights of Times Square, but far beyond Manhattan lies a quieter, more fragile New York, one that once pulsed with the rhythm of Canadian footsteps. For decades, the small towns of upstate New York lived off a quiet economy. Every car crossing the border from Ontario brought not just money, but memories. By the spring of 2024, Canadians were the largest group of international visitors to New York State, especially in the northern and western regions. But in just 12 months, something shattered. Border towns now report a 30 to 50% drop in Canadian spending. Parking lots near the Thousand Islands are nearly empty. Inns that once had waiting lists now sit with vacant rooms. Restaurants that used to stay open until 11 p.m. are locking their doors at 7. What changed? It wasn't a single law or an economic crash, but a creeping feeling. Canadians began to sense that
Could
their
it be due
presence
to
was no
political
longer
tensions?
wanted. Reports of strict border interrogations, rising anti-foreigner sentiment in online U.S. forums, and a sharp increase in hotel and dining costs pushed them to reconsider. And as the Canadian dollar weakened, a weekend trip that once felt affordable suddenly felt like a financial burden. "It's not just the money," said one man from Ottawa in a viral TikTok. "It's that we don't feel welcome anymore. We used to feel like family. This shift has cut deep." At Lake George, a boat rental owner who once expanded his fleet to keep up with Canadian demand now stares at his docks, empty from morning to dusk. "Last year, I had too many customers. This year, not one Canadian. My son says to sell the boats. But how do I sell a part of my life?" These aren't luxury businesses. They're family-run. People who built their livelihoods around predictable seasonal waves are now facing uncertain winters and silent springs. The man who used to sell maple donuts by the roadside says he hasn't seen a Quebec plate in weeks. The clerk at the duty-free store near Buffalo said she used to smile at familiar faces. Now she watches shadows on the pavement. New York City may still sparkle, but the state is bleeding quietly from its edges. Rural communities that once thrived on warmth and cross-border friendship now feel cold and forgotten. A state cannot survive on its skyline alone, and a dream built on tourism cannot endure if it loses the people who once believed in it. Perhaps what New York needs isn't a new ad campaign, but an apology, a conversation, a reminder that borders don't just divide, they also connect. Because if this emotional fracture deepens, New York risks becoming two places, one crowded with lights and fame, and another fading in silence, waiting for neighbors who may never return. Number 4, Arizona. Arizona used to laugh at winter. Locals joked that the only snow they saw was on postcards, and the only ice came in margaritas. But in 2025, that old joke lands differently, because winter has arrived in a new form, not in temperature, but an absence. The Canadian snowbirds who once filled the deserts with laughter, life, and economic energy are gone for decades. Tens of thousands of Canadians, especially retirees, treated Arizona like a second home. They came for sunshine, stayed for the sense of community, and quietly built entire seasonal economies in towns like Yuma, Mesa, and Tucson. They played golf at sunrise, packed diners by 6 a.m., and filled RV parks from October through April. But now, the RV parks are empty. Golf courses echo in silence. Small-town grocery stores have even cut back on importing Canadian staples, like red rose tea and maple cookies, because the familiar faces are no longer walking through the doors. In 2024, Arizona saw a more than 35% decline in seasonal Canadian traffic, according to local tourism boards. And in 2025, it's only getting worse. The reasons go beyond airfare and insurance. Older Canadians are quietly turning away, not out of anger, but out of discomfort. The post-pandemic political climate has turned health into a battleground. Debates about vaccines, public mandates, and personal freedoms, often amplified in Arizona media, have made some Canadians feel unwelcome, or even unsafe. For retirees used to calm and stability, it's become emotionally exhausting. Add in skyrocketing travel insurance for seniors, and a warm winter suddenly feels like an unjustifiable luxury. A retired couple from British Columbia recently said, "Arizona used to be a place where we felt like we belonged. Now, we're not sure if we're even wanted," on the Arizona side. That loss is deeply felt. A cafe owner in Tucson who used to open before dawn to serve Canadian golfers now stands in an empty kitchen. They'd laugh, share stories, tip well, and always thanked me. I can still hear their voices. Now it's just silence, and the sun is rising over empty tables. Her business has lost over half its winter revenue. She's considering closing after 30 years. This is not just about tourism. Many towns in Arizona were built around a rhythm the Canadians arrive. The season blooms, and everyone benefits. Without them, the rhythm is broken. RV lots sit like ghost towns. Side streets once filled with lawn chairs and neighbors swapping stories now remain still. When a community depends on returning visitors, their disappearance isn't just financial. A piece of the state's soul quietly goes with them. Arizona still shines with the same desert sun. But if that sun beams down on empty streets and shuttered shops, what warmth does it truly offer if Arizona wants its winters to feel alive again? It must offer more than sunshine. It must offer belonging. A smile at the border, a conversation without suspicion, an open seat at the diner. Because in the end, warmth isn't just weather, it's how we treat the people who once called this place their winter home. Number 5. Nevada. Las Vegas was built on a promise escape, excitement, and a place where everyone, no matter where they came from, could feel larger than life. But in 2025, that illusion is flickering. Beneath the dazzling lights of the Strip, a quieter crisis is unfolding. Over 1.7 million Canadians visited Nevada in 2024, making them one of the state's most loyal and predictable tourist groups. They didn't just come once. Many returned every year, some even twice per season. They weren't just tourists, they were regulars. They had favorite front desk clerks, preferred buffets, and a routine that felt like home. But now, that rhythm has collapsed. As of early 2025, hotel occupancy in Las Vegas dropped from over 90% to barely 50% during peak weeks. Airlines like Air Canada and WestJet have canceled or severely reduced direct flights into Las Vegas and Reno. Meanwhile, casinos are slashing entertainment budgets. High-end restaurants are offering aggressive discounts midweek just to keep their kitchens busy. Entire convention centers sit quiet on days that used to echo with footsteps and music. But the real damage isn't just in numbers, it's in trust. Canadians once saw Nevada as their playground, their midwinter burst of joy, but something has shifted, quietly. They've begun saying that Las Vegas no longer feels like a place for them. It's not just about rising prices or airfare, it's about feeling unwelcome. Cultural clashes, politicized debates, and aggressive rhetoric on issues like immigration, health policy, and international relations have created a subtle but real distance. A traveler from Calgary said at best it feels like a party we're no longer invited to, and that absence is rippling out far beyond the Strip. A waitress at a vintage buffet, who has worked there for over 20 years, noticed it first. Spring used to be my best season. Canadian guests were always so kind. They tipped well. They laughed. This year, none of them came. My hours were cut in half. My rent's still full. Though that gap isn't just about lost revenue, it's about lives disrupted. Casino dealers, tour guides, airport shuttle drivers. These are the people who kept Nevada's dream running behind the scenes. Now, many are watching their livelihoods dissolve, not because of a global crisis, but because relationships were neglected. Las Vegas still glows at night, but light alone cannot carry a city. What makes a place thrive is trust, memory, and the sense that you're wanted. And for Canadians who quietly fueled entire off-peak seasons, that feeling has disappeared. Nevada must now face an uncomfortable truth even the strongest cities can fall when they stop listening. Flash doesn't replace connection. Volume can't mask absence. And without rebuilding bridges with those who once called this state their second home, even the brightest lights may soon shine on empty rooms. Number 6. Washington. It used to be said that Vancouverites didn't travel to Washington, they simply crossed into their backyard. The border between British Columbia and Washington was more of a friendly checkpoint than a real divide. In 2024, over 3 million Canadians did exactly that, driving across Peace Arch, Sumas, and Blaine to fill up their gas tanks, browse Bellingham's malls, load up at Costco, sip coffee on the Seattle waterfront, and return before sunset. The traffic flowed like a daily routine, predictable, profitable, and deeply human. But by early 2025, something subtle but seismic had shifted. The border didn't physically change, but emotionally, it had closed. Malls in Bellingham now stand eerily quiet. Tulalip Outlet Mall cut 30% of its peak season workforce. Roadside produce stands from Linden to Mount Vernon have been forced to discard unsold fruits and vegetables. A supermarket owner just miles from the border said, "We used to order inventory based on Canadian traffic. Now, we're guessing, and we're always guessing wrong. So what happened?" The Canadian dollar's value has slipped. Yes, but that's not the full story. What once felt like a weekend adventure now feels like an overcomplicated task. Post-COVID border policies remain rigid. Travelers complain of long waits, extra questioning, and a lingering atmosphere of suspicion. And while the policies may be meant for safety, the emotional cost is steep, Canadians are saying. It no longer feels easy or welcome. A drive across the line once felt like a breath of fresh air. Now, it feels like walking into an airport interrogation room for a coffee run, and that fracture is hitting the people who live near the seams. In towns like Ferndale and Blaine, every Canadian license plate used to mean groceries bought, gas tanks filled, or breakfast orders placed at 8 a.m. sharp. One bakery owner in Linden shared, "Canadians used to make up half my Saturday business. I had one family from Surrey that came every month. Haven't seen them in nearly a year. I've had to let go 2 staff, and I'm not sure we'll make it through next winter." Washington has always been more than just a border state. It was a bridge, a cultural handshake, a quiet agreement between neighbors that said we're connected. But now, that bridge is creaking, and if it collapses, the damage won't be visible in the cities. It'll show up in the empty booths of diners, the silent gas stations, and the farmers who start planting less because fewer hands are reaching for their harvests. Washington doesn't need grand slogans or glittering campaigns. Sometimes what matters most is humility, a willingness to acknowledge that something's changed, and an effort to rebuild what was once effortless. Maybe it starts with a simple phrase printed on a sign just before the Peace Arch. "We remember you. We miss you. Come back soon." Because if Washington loses the people who once crossed over not as strangers, but as friends, it risks becoming just a place with pine forests and beautiful mountains, but no one on the road to see them. Number 7. Michigan. For decades, Canadians, especially Ontarians, called their trips to Michigan the most familiar journey. A quick cross over the Ambassador Bridge, some shopping in Detroit, lunch in Port Huron, maybe an overnight at Mackinac Island, and home again before the next day's sun. But by 2025, that rhythm, once as reliable as the tides of Lake Huron, has fallen silent. Millions of Canadian visitors have simply vanished, and in their absence, Michigan's border towns are beginning to feel hollowed out. In 2024, Canada accounted for a massive share of international visitors to Michigan, with the bulk crossing over from Ontario through checkpoints in Windsor, Sault Ste. Marie, and Blue Water Bridge. But now, ferry lines once packed during weekends are slashing their schedules due to low turnout. Border motels are reporting 20 to 30% revenue losses. In towns like St. Ignace, duty-free shops and mom-and-pop gas stations say it's their worst season in a decade. Even cherished local festivals, like the Port Huron Canada Day weekend celebration, are under threat. Some organizers confess they may cancel due to insufficient turnout and lack of volunteers. So what happened? The reasons are subtle, but deeply emotional. The Canadian dollar's weakness has made Michigan gas and goods 25-30% more expensive. But it's not just economics, it's trust. Canadians are growing weary of a border that once felt like a welcome mat and now feels like a wall. More rigid questioning, unpredictable wait times, and an air of suspicion have turned day trips into stressful decisions. I used to go every other weekend, said a retiree from Windsor. Now it just feels like I have to explain myself for wanting lunch. And for Michiganders living in towns near the border, the impact is immediate. A restaurant owner in Sault Ste. Marie confessed, "Half my summer business came from Canada. This year, we barely covered payroll. I had to send my niece home early from her summer job." It's not just money they're losing: connection, tradition, and the sense of shared rhythm that once defined summers in this region. Michigan's connection with Ontario was never just geography, it was personal. A handshake over the bridge, a joke exchanged at the gas station, an unspoken understanding that for a few hours, the border disappeared. But now that shared space is being eroded not by one big conflict, but by a slow forgetting. The bridges are still standing, the lakes still shimmer, but if no one crosses anymore, then Michigan becomes a place of missed chances and fading memories. Perhaps what's needed isn't a flashy campaign, but a simple sign at the border that says, "Come back. We still remember you." Because without the Canadian families who once brought laughter to the lakeside, filled the motels, and supported local diners, Michigan isn't just losing revenue, it's losing part of what made summer feel like summer. Number 8, Maine. In 2025, Maine's quiet beauty has never felt lonelier. Once filled with Canadian visitors from Quebec and New Brunswick, its campsites, inns, and harbors now stand still, for the first time in 20 years. Peak season campsites were left vacant. Coastal cruise tours canceled departures due to low turnout. Ice cream shops and seafood markets in Bar Harbor closed weeks early. Canadians once made Maine their summer tradition, drawn to its calm, its nature, and its warmth. But now, rising travel costs, unfriendly border policies, and growing discomfort with U.S. cultural shifts have quietly pushed them away. What Maine offered wasn't flash, it was belonging, and when that feeling faded, so did the tourists. Locals are starting to feel the loss not just in income, but in the rhythm of the season. A coastal innkeeper said, "Without them, it doesn't feel like summer. Maine doesn't need to sell its beauty, it needs to restore its welcome." A message sent across the border, one that simply says, "We remember you," could reignite the bond, because without familiar footsteps along its shore, even Maine's iconic lighthouses shine into silence. Number 9, South Carolina. Once a winter haven for Canadian snowbirds. South Carolina, especially Myrtle Beach, is now facing a chilling absence. In 2025, winter cancellation rates jumped by 40%, gutting what was once the busiest season. Resorts and condos sit half empty, some offering a free first month just to fill space. Beachfront restaurants report barely 50% capacity, while golf courses extend hours with no bookings. Canadians once flocked here for sunshine, affordability, and that easygoing southern charm. But recent shifts, stricter immigration rhetoric, reduced personal freedoms, and political unease have quietly alienated many, paired with surging costs for rentals, airfare, and insurance. What was once an annual escape now feels like a burden. A manager at a local diner shared, "We still set the tables, but no one's walking in." South Carolina doesn't need more promotion, it needs to rebuild trust. A gesture of welcome, a message of warmth, could rekindle what's been lost. Because even the most stunning coastline feels empty when those who once called it home no longer return. Number 10, Florida. Florida once welcomed over 3.5 million Canadians each year, so many that some towns echoed with more French and English than American voices. But by winter 2025, that harmony fell silent. Canadian tourist numbers plunged over 40%. Thousands of rental condos sat empty. Resorts stretched their offers to desperate lengths. Beloved Canadian restaurants in Fort Myers shut down entirely. Mobile home parks that once buzzed with snowbirds now sit still, overtaken by wild grass. The dream has shifted. Soaring healthcare costs, rising insurance, unpredictable weather, and social unease have turned Florida from a retreat into a risk. Even longtime visitors are choosing Portugal, Mexico, or simply staying home. A resident from Quebec wrote online, "Florida doesn't feel like it wants us anymore, but it's not too late. What Florida needs isn't more sun, it's reconnection." A heartfelt message. We remember you, and policies that welcome rather than distance can start to rebuild what's been lost. Because paradise is not just palm trees, it's the people who come back, year after year. From the sunny shores of Florida to the peaceful woods of Maine, America is quietly losing more than just tourists. It's losing trust, familiarity, and the heartbeat of seasonal connections. When millions of Canadians stop coming, it's not just hotels and shops that feel the impact, it's the families, the workers, the communities that built their lives around return visits. This isn't just a tourism dip. It's a fading bond between two neighbors who once shared more than borders, they shared rhythms, memories, and warmth. If you felt the silence this winter, you're not alone. Let's keep this conversation going. Comment below if your town has changed. Subscribe to help us continue telling the unseen stories that affect everyday lives. Our goal is simple: to shed light on what's quietly disappearing. So maybe, just maybe, we can bring some of it back.